Hi, Sunita. Thank you for joining me again and with the lovely topic of CMMC.
Amazing to meet again. Yes.
Awesome. I have a couple of more questions, more in regards of deliverables, but it seems that some people are still confused. They need a little extra guidance, and hopefully the questions that I have today can lead them in the right direction.
For sure. Let's get through the questions then.
Okay. So first starting out, what are the absolute must-have deliverables companies need in place before a CMMC assessment?
Okay, so if you are going to approach any certification body, you want to have you should know certain things. If you're most of the time you're going to go for a level 2 right now, you really want all your asset inventory list to be completed. When I say asset inventory, just don't please stick to your hardware. Make sure that you have the inventory list of all the software, every hardware that you use for the configuration of network. It should be there. Everything to do with server, everything to do with infrastructure, everything to do with third-party providers because they are assets and information assets as well. So make sure that you have complete lists of these things. Then the second thing you need to have completed very thorough are your procedures and policies, and not just in the documentation format. You want to have it being used as a cultural practice, because when asked a question, you should be able to pinpoint to the right sections within the policy and the procedure of something has been implemented. Then the next thing you need in place is something called the system security plan, which is an overarching document which speaks to what your system is about, what environment are you supporting, what are the several equipments that are being used, the ports, and how have you addressed all the specific domain requirements. So you need a thorough. When I say thorough, you don't want a lot of every control. You can reference the documents that you have used. You don't need to make this thorough as well, but you want to have a very good diagram. You want to identify who are the roles responsible. Some basic information should be there. And POEM, which is plan of action milestones. If some things have to be implemented as a progress, yes, you want that as well. So all these are a must, and definitely you want to complete first internal audit before you go ahead and invite any third parties, because you want to do a check yourself that if you're meeting with that requirements or not. And be very unbiased about when you go through these assessments, because these are the avenues for improvement.
Okay, awesome. Well, is there a way that companies should prepare their team, not just their documents, to make sure the audits run smoothly?
Yes, absolutely. Because as I mentioned, it is mostly about how all these processes are being followed as a culture. We're not just looking for one or two people knowing these policies. The process owners, sometimes they are called topic specific policies. So let's say you have a system admin, he or she would know all these, how they have configured, how certain things are being monitored, as well as the users of that enclave being aware about, okay, this is the disciplinary process, this is how the access is controlled. So people should know and be able to speak to these requirements and also report any issues quite in a very timely manner. So it is a whole lot. A portion of it is documenting, a portion of it is implementing, a major portion is awareness. A very big portion is awareness, where you are using these practices consistently and persistently.
Well, let's say someone hired a consultant already. How would they know if their consultant really prepared them for audit or just gave them a checklist?
There are different ways consulting happens. And if there is no right and wrong, but some things you want to be mindful is it's a standard, right? The standards are open to interpretation. How to implement something. See, there are a lot of tools out there which can be implemented, but then there is a requirement of a lot of thoroughness in the procedure wise and how that can be implemented. That is exactly where you need a consultant to make sure that what are your options. Understand what are your options. Your consultant may not be the person who configures your systems. You may have an MSP and they are doing it, or you may have hired an MSP who is going to be your consultant. In either case, as I mentioned, there are multiple ways of doing or implementing requirements in an environment. What works best? Have a conversation and implement them. Make sure that it's implemented and do some, I call it a readiness check. Somebody who can do a readiness check and then guide them, okay, this is where you still have a gap, this is how you want to fix it. And this all happens through regular setup meetings where you handhold them piecemeal by piecemeal and taking them through the entire journey where they are able to implement them, because it's a lot. It's a lot to get it implemented, to keep a check on things. I have a tendency of saying this is not their only job. People have different day jobs which they are delivering to. So this is a portion of their work, but not their entire job profile. So you want someone who will be as invested in your success. You get the idea when you're talking to an individual that is this individual committed to my success, and they will be the people who will give me quite the response I need in order, because sometimes clients also don't know what questions to ask.
True.
But if somebody just gives you a checklist and says, go follow, I don't think that's a right approach, because there are so many requirements, sub-requirements, that clarity is needed.
Yeah. Okay. And if a client is watching this and feeling overwhelmed, what's the very first step they should take today to start preparing with confidence?
Okay. So the very first thing a client should do, given that there is a bunch of data out there, bunch of information out there, take a pen and paper. Just take a pen and paper and then define what is that secure enclave? What are you trying to protect? How many people or what projects are going to be there? Very simply put. Understand what documentation is needed, what time frame you have. But defining it with a pen and paper, you can easily draft something up and draw it in a very, not in a fancy way. What is the data? What is going to be the systems in there? Work with your IT person. If you're not an IT person, how the data flow is going to happen. Get the basic sense, because that is the basic information you would ever need to make sure that you are positioned for success here. Because essentially, you are first setting up the environment. Then second thing, you will put people, the systems in there, so that enclave is the control enclave where CUI is being processed. It will not be your entire organization. Don't try to make it your entire organization. Keep it very specific, very standard, and see how the flow of the data happens. Start there. Basic thing, you want to always start, and not with the policies, procedures. Once you have the data flow network diagram there, you will be able to then go ahead and create the policies, procedures around that environment. And then you will have a clarity, okay, this system is out of the scope as an enterprise level as opposed to in the secure enclave. If you don't know, again, we are always there to help. So pick up the phone, call us. We'll be able to walk you there into that with a clarity, okay, what you need, what you do not need. But you really do not want to start with policies, procedures, and put people in there trying to secure an enclave without knowing what really would you want there to happen within that enclave.
Perfect. I mean, it sounds simple enough to bring that overwhelmment down for certain.
You have to. You can't make it organization wide, because then you are putting a lot of data, but understanding the concepts, what is basic necessity. I always start with the scope, because without the scope, you are just making a lot of bunch of document. And how do you know that this is how you want to speak to a control?
Mm-hmm.
When you have 10 systems and 5 of them may not be necessary.
Fair.
Either start with a pen and paper, or you can get on a call and get this clarified and then make advised decisions.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you for your time and most importantly, your knowledge. Hopefully this brings someone a little bit more clarity in the CMMC realm, but thank you for your time, Sunita.
Thank you, Mayaj. It was a pleasure.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.